Right. Okay.
Good news. Good news. Good news.
More of a lawless society in my lifetime here in this country. 0344 499 1000. You're listening to me, Mike Graham, on the fastest growing radio station on the planet. Now available on your television as well. It's the home of common sense. It is, of course, Talk Radio.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Let us talk to Peter Hitchens, Mail on Sunday columnist, voice of common sense. Peter, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
So, I mean, we should probably start with England, I suppose, because I quite liked your little piece in the column this week about the Denmark game, and you know, you touched upon the behaviour of some of the fans, but also on this kind of notion that we get rather carried away. You know, there was a huge belief. I mean, I was watching the BBC coverage last night. Gary Lineker and Frank Lampard and Rio Ferdinand were talking as if England had already won it. And they were playing a team that had not lost a game in 33 games, Italy.
Well, I don't like to attack anybody else's beliefs. And I view football and the excitement around as a belief that other people hold that I just don't. And the only time I get annoyed is when the whole world seems to have decided that I have to have an opinion about it, that I have to be enthusiastic when I'm not. I take roughly the view of football as Karl Marx sort of religion. He was much more sympathetic to it than people realise. He said it was the sigh of the oppressed creature, the soul of soulless conditions, the sentiment of a heartless world. People need something to believe in, to get excited about. I personally would prefer it if they did so in an old-fashioned Christian way. But football fills this hole in the lives of many people, and it gives them a lot of pleasure. Well, good for them. But they shouldn't assume that everybody shares the same thing. And nor should people go, well, yesterday morning at 7 o'clock on BBC Radio 4, the headline actually suggested that if the English football team won its match last night, they would become immortal. The word was actually used. I think this has gone too far. The BBC is supposed to check things, I think, 3 times before it puts them on the radio. And I think that had a hard time establishing factually that immortality would be conferred on the victorious football team. It's just ridiculous loss of restraint and proportion of the kind that we keep undergoing. So sure, I have absolutely no desire to stop anybody else enjoying it, and I'm happy for them to do so. But there are unpleasant aspects to it. I found the booing of the national anthems, first of Denmark and then of Italy, absolutely disgraceful. I think this is, if you're supposed to be a sporting person, you're supposed to believe that a fair fight in which you respect your opponents, and booing other people's national anthems simply is not. I find particularly repellent with the booing of the Danish national anthem. This is a small, friendly country which never did us any harm, and actually which we have done some harm to. And ridiculous behaviour. I don't like the taking of the knee, which is a politicisation which demands that people take a political position on something which they may not wish to. And again, is totalitarian in its nature. So those things I don't know. And then again, people keep telling me that football, you're a middle class snob. You constantly go on about how violent football fans are. All that's over. Well, it isn't over. Is
Well,
it?
it's clearly not over, is it?
It's all last night, and also there is an awful lot, I'm afraid, of very uneducated and foolish racial bigotry still to be found among some of the people who get enthusiastic about football, and it's showed its ugly face again. I think people like me are entitled to say it's not snobbery at all. It's just this is a form of entertainment or sport, or whatever you wish to call it. It's increasingly entertainment, it seems to me, which has for some reason attracted some very unpleasant things and doesn't seem to be very good at driving them away or getting them under control.
No, and yet it continually fails. I mean, you know, apparently UEFA were aware of the fact that some fans broke into the stadium for the Denmark game, which was partly as a result of the seats not all being sold out, so there were spaces effectively for them. But they didn't really sort of let that story out because they worried that the COVID police would affect them, and the COVID police would say, well, you can't play the final at Wembley if you can't protect the numbers of people in there. And so, you know, it's a sort of overall failure, I think.
Yeah, you can understand that, though, can't you? When all of us live our lives now under the constant threat of the COVID police deciding that something entirely innocent, which we've previously done, turns out to be bad, and also of things being simply shut down in this foot stamping way, because the great objective of total safety from disease and the abolition of death has to be pursued at all costs. So you can understand that again. Well, I was more disturbed by the fact that nobody in the football authorities seemed to be particularly bothered by the shining of a laser in the face of the Danish goalkeeper, of incredibly dangerous act of criminal violence, in my view, which, if the perpetrator is ever caught and convicted, should result in a lengthy prison sentence. And there were suggestions, which I didn't think were entirely outrageous, that the game should be replayed, especially since the moment at which this happened, nobody knows. I don't think anyone's asked the goalkeeper whether he was affected by it, but it was a vital moment in the game.
It was, but he did save the ball, so I suppose you might argue that.
Well, yes, but then again, he was unable when it was kicked back at him.
Listen, I mean, I'm told by people who have been going to the games that the security has been so lax because all the security guards have been doing is making sure that you've got your COVID pass. And actually, whether you've got a laser pen or drugs or fireworks or bottles of beer or anything else hasn't been checked.
Well, I noticed an account of some people going to a park to watch the game on screens yesterday, being searched and having all their documents demanded as well. It's extraordinary what people have come to put up with, but that is, as I say, where we now live, a country in which people accept far more state interference in their personal lives than they ever did before, or than they should.
Yeah, and there is this kind of the creeping collectivism, I call it, I suppose, where Gareth Southgate became this kind of messianic figure. Who could never be questioned, who could not be criticised, and regardless of whatever you mean. Like you, I was listening to the BBC, much to my chagrin, last night, BBC 5 Live, and the guy who interviewed Gareth Southgate after the game thanked him and then said, "And thank you for everything you've done for us," as if he was like the Dalai Lama or something.
The dear leader.
Yeah.
Quite possibly, if there were an election for dear leader, he would now win. But again, turning to our friends at the BBC, on one morning last week, they actually hired an actor, Rory Kinnear, to read out Gareth Southgate's message to his players and the people of England, or whatever it was, in reverent tones. I thought, have I stumbled into thought for the day, or has the daily service already begun? It had a completely religious aspect to it, of utter reverence. Well, okay, I mean, I'm sure Mr. Southgate is a very fine footballer and extremely good manager, but things can go too far.
Well, isn't it fascinating as well that the people making these kinds of editorial decisions would sneer at the likes of you for going to church and actually enjoying worshipping your God because they think it's rather pathetic?
Indeed, this is one of the great joys of my life, listening to people haranguing me for religious belief who have beliefs which I find far more outrageous and harder to justify, which they pursue with enormous enthusiasm, entirely unconscious that there is any kind of comparison.
Yes, exactly right. You also wrote on Sunday about your fears for our freedoms, that we keep being promised them being returned to us. Certainly there was a lot going on this weekend which would suggest that lockdown is kind of finished, but that's a bit of a false dawn, isn't it?
I think there's a great wrestling match going on in Whitehall between those people who would like to bring it to an end, partly for the sake of the economy, and further at the moment it must be strangling the economy with enormous force, and those who want to carry it on forever. And I noticed that it's now being said that Mr. Johnson has backed away from his original statement that once we were released on the 19th, it would be irreversible. And I strongly suspect that there will be a very, very strong propaganda attempt, of course, I have to mention them again, here we go, the BBC, to suggest that whatever opening up takes place after July the 19th will be said to have caused a supposed spike in the number of cases. And again, because round about, I suppose, October, November last year, the country wholly abandoned reason and serious analysis when it looked at statistics, it's going to be very difficult to say, well, do these statistics mean what we think they mean or what we're being told that they mean? And as soon as you can cram the graph up tight enough and get enough spikes and peaks on it, people can quite easily, I think, especially in the current mood, be panicked back into accepting a restoration of all the things, or most of the things, which will be lifted on the 19th. I'm not at all confident that we will get through to, say, October without it all being brought back again. But the difficulty is you can't now argue against it, because the last autumn's events pretty much ended any serious opposition or scepticism about what was being said. I saw yesterday in Oxford, I tweeted a picture of a rather expensive-looking truck with a big electronic poster on it saying, get tested for COVID. It occurred to me that if we had actually had the facilities, I'm not suggesting that I would have been in favour of this at the time, but if we had the facilities to test the population as intensively as we are doing now for COVID positivity in March and April of 2020, when all this was beginning, we'd have some basis for comparison. I think if we'd done that, we'd have an enormous number of positives compared with now. But because we didn't do that, we sort of assumed it was zero then, and we look at the peaks now, which I think are almost certainly much lower than they would have been in the spring of 2020, and we get alarmed about them. But again, with all these figures, there is no serious attempt to examine them for proportionality and true meaning and classification in an intelligent way. And this is how statistics are misused, by presenting them in a way that the figures are correct, but they're presented in a way which gives a misleading impression of what they mean.
Yes.
And this is what we will face very much in the late summer and early autumn in this country, I think. And I'd be surprised if we make it through it without a restoration of at least some of the restrictions which are about to be lifted.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Stay with us, Peter, if you would. We're going to take a short break. Peter Hitchens with his Man on Sunday column has got much more to talk to him about, particularly with regard to the mask debate, which is still public of Mike Graham right here on Talk Radio. Peter Hitchens is with us. Peter, as I was saying, Sajid Javid supposedly is making some kind of statement this afternoon in the House. We're not quite sure what it's going to be. Hopefully it won't be some kind of rolling back or moving backwards of what they plan to do on July the 19th.
I think it's clear that a point I've been making for some time, that those who had hoped that the wearing of masks would become a thing of the past, as it has, I think, in large parts of the United States now, are going to be disappointed. But rather than continue to enforce this by law, a very peculiar arrangement seems to be coming our way, where we will be expected, I'm not sure quite by whom, to wear masks. Which seems to me to be possibly a recipe for confrontation between mask wearers and non-mask wearers in public places, and not likely to be effective. And then again, perhaps this too will lead to demands and political action to restore the mask edict, which has temporarily been removed. Again, until this is all gone, until I can once again live as I lived before March of 2020, you're not going to get me to say, oh, joy and wonder, it's all over. I see many, many people still fighting very, very hard in the media and in the establishment and in politics to try and keep us as restrained as they possibly can. No, quite. Because they believe they're so clever and so good that they think that they have the freedom and the power to do so, and they're justified in this. And there is, as I say, this battle going on, in which you can see it quite clearly in the obviously extremely unbiased interventions of the British Broadcasting Corporation, who, by the way, invited me onto the Today programme last week, and then uninvited me a few hours later. But this is a really funny thing, on the pretext that there was too much COVID on the programme. So the whole programme was about COVID. Right. It wasn't too much COVID there, it was too much Peter Hitchens. Well, exactly. Which is any quantity more than zero as far as the Today programme is concerned.
Well, they seem to have Neil Ferguson on an awful lot, don't they? He's like their
don't they though?
I mean, he's on practically every day. But I'll tell you what was also interesting yesterday. A lot of people pointed out that Messrs. Chris Whitty, Patrick Vallance, and Jonathan Van Tam all appeared at Wembley. I think they were all in the Royal Box at one point or another over the Wimbledon over the weekend. None of them wearing a mask, despite that Chris Whitty had said if they were in an area where there were a lot of people around, he would wear a mask. So I'm afraid that doesn't really do their cause much good.
The work quite a lot of people there, weren't there? Yes.
Yes.
I don't know. But of course, they are. They have been wholly inconsistent over this. I keep a treasury of quotations from these people back in the early months of the continuing crisis. A blog posting called "Why Are People Still Wearing Masks, particularly outdoors?" All the quotations from these professors and experts and the World Health Organization saying, well, actually, no masks are much use either for protecting those who wear them or for protecting other people from catching COVID from them. So both the claims which were made for them were at one time dismissed as either untrue or so weak as not to be worth bothering with by the very people who now advocate it. And this extraordinary reverse ferret international U-turn continues to be a fascination to me. Deborah Cohen, of course, the BBC Newsnight medical correspondent, at the time stated that she had discovered from her contacts in the World Health Organization that the reversal had been political and not based on medical evidence. It's all there. You can say it to your bright green in the face as many times as you like. But large parts of, say, politics and the media still continue to ignore this factual thing. The decision to make us all wear masks was not based upon medical need, but on politics. Anybody who actually thinks that one of these things, a floppy, loose, damp cloth mask, frequently stuffed in the pocket, taken out again, fingered, reused, could be of any possible serious benefit against an aerosol-borne virus. That is ridiculous in the first place. If people actually started wearing the sort of masks which do prevent infection, then I think they would find them a good deal more oppressive and certainly a huge amount more expensive. But these things which a university want are a symbol of adherence to the cult of, we'll do anything to avoid COVID, and we will stop thinking if the government tells us to stop thinking, rather than a medical precaution.
Yes, and now, of course, it's seen as a sign that you are a good person because you take other people's cares into account, and that's why you're wearing a mask, because it's to protect them.
Great people who meet me because they know I'm a bad person. Now they can tell without any further investigation from a long way off that I'm a bad person.
Yes. Well, I like to look at it from the other perspective, that if you see somebody wearing a mask after July the 19th, they're very happily pointing out that these are people that you wouldn't particularly want to converse with because they're clearly on the wrong side of the argument.
I do try not to be like them, though. I think if I see someone wearing a mask, there may be a sort of inner impulse to deride them as feeble, unthinking sheep. But you have to suppress it. These are other human beings. You won't persuade them out of their masks by being horrible to them or by denouncing them.
I wouldn't be horrible to them. I just think
wear it. I'm not in any way going to attack you privately or publicly for doing so. But I just wish that you would make the necessary investigations into experimental or scientific facts and see how unjustified it is as an action, and at the very least consider all those things before condemning me for not wearing one. But I don't think those of us who don't believe in this should treat the other side as they so often treat us. I think that's a mistake.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I would not. I did not mean to give that impression. All I'm saying is that I certainly wouldn't be aggressive towards anybody, and I certainly wouldn't deride them publicly. But I just find it useful, as I say, as a guide, generally speaking.
No, sure. I say this, but I'm in distress sometimes talking to people in shops who, for heaven's sake, are only trying to enforce rules that other people have told them to enforce, who tell me that they've been abused by people who they've asked to wear masks. I think it's so wrong. Yeah. If people ask you to wear a mask, then you're exempt or not, then be polite about saying that. I mean, otherwise, you're simply going to confirm their prejudice that non-mask wearers are antisocial thugs. And really, people should be very careful about this. And if you want to make a case, then the first starting point is politeness, civility. Be pleasant to other people, for goodness sake. It's not that hard.
No, I know. I mean, sadly, politeness seems to have gone the way of many things in this country, but there we are. Peter, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens, Mail on Sunday columnist, of course. We'd love to hear from all of you out there because we've got plenty of time to take your calls on this show. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Don't forget, of course, we are